Greetings, programs, and welcome to a new episode of the Awesome Friday podcast. I am your host, Matthew, and joining me, as is standard operating procedure, is Simon.
Yes.
How are you today, Simon?
I'm like the bass guitar in this live band. Like, you can still play without me, but it sounds off. I'm okay. I'm okay. I've calmed down a bit. If you listen to our bonus material, you'll hear me squeaking basically, but you'll have to become a patron to listen to it. But so I've calmed down a bit now. It's very nice to be back, and I'm very excited that it's Oscars weekend. It's one of my favorite weekends, not just because of the ridiculous circus show that is the Oscars, but also we get to live blog it, which is always a lot of fun and actually makes the night much more enjoyable. So that will be, I guess, when this goes out, it's later today, right? So
yeah, as of the time we're recording this, it's tomorrow, and as of the time our dear listeners are listening, our live blog will be this evening at awesomefriday.ca. So if you are interested in following along with that, we do an old school live updating live blog rather than a tweet storm, although I'm sure we'll be tweeting as well, or I will anyway. And it's always a lot of fun, and we enjoy doing it. It's one of our like annual in-person hangout events too, which is nice.
Except we haven't done it in person for years and years and years. But,
there's been something happened. I don't remember what it was, but something prevented us from being in person the last couple of years.
Oh, what was that?
I don't know.
I can't remember. All I know is that raving Shakespeare treat was pretty good. So I remember that. That's good.
Yeah, that was pretty good. It was pretty good. You're talking, of course, about the one that Kevin Costner founded, and then he found a mail truck and delivered the mail. That's the one you're talking about, right?
No, I'm talking about the one that Kevin Costner founded, and then he had to swim a lot.
Oh, right. Of course. I mean, as long as what we're really talking about is the one where Christopher Plummer does Shakespeare in an alien language. We should.
Matt, you're always talking about that. No matter what the context, you could link it in 3 steps back to Christopher Plummer quoting Shakespeare as a Klingon.
I mean, yeah, Bech. I mean, so yes, it's you haven't heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon.
I do enjoy. I forgot about that line. I do enjoy how Star Trek keeps going back to Shakespeare, just randomly bringing out Shakespeare. Like it's the sign of ultimate like intelligence is when they go back to Shakespeare.
I mean, we as a society do that, so it makes sense. Star Trek is a reflection of our society.
It's true, but it turns out the aliens do that too. And now I want to watch that movie. Good job. I've got it on Laserdisc. I might wheel that out later on today.
I mean, it is the second best Star Trek movie after The Wrath of Khan. So
it's the third best Star Trek movie after The Voyage Home. And the other ones, I don't know. I like the one with the whales and computer and nuclear whistles. Like, I like the funny one that completely broke protocol with the previous movies.
Yeah, the one that's actually also the third in a loose trilogy, started into 2 and 3 and 4.
But it's completely unlike what came before it.
It's definitely lighter. Yeah. And I also recently I was scrolling TikTok and I heard someone say that the Voyage Home had environmental undertones to it, and I was like, no, those aren't. Those are just the tones. Those are just the tones of the movie. Like, it's not.
I was going to say, was this one of these hilarious TikToks? That's like, if you watch carefully, you can discover that Star Trek: The Voyage Home actually is talking about man's damage to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
if you watch closely, whilst your eyes are open, you might see it.
If you watch the movie, you might see this main theme pop up every frame. TikTok. People's hot takes on TikTok either make me laugh or infuriate me. I know that's one of the main reasons why I stopped because I was just getting too angry.
Interestingly,
do people not just watch the movie? Do people not just watch movies anymore?
Interestingly, I find that I'm pretty forgiving of TikTok these days for a couple of reasons. One is that obviously the format is quite short. It's difficult to cram any meaningful information into like 15, 30 seconds or a minute. But also, a lot of the people who are big on TikTok are super young, and and like, there's a. It's interestingly, I see like a lot of people being like, say it with comments or response videos, being like, "This person discovered Lit 101," and like, honestly, this oftentimes the person that they're saying that to is like 19, and you know what? They are discovering literature and analysis 101, and maybe we should celebrate that just a little bit that they're even trying. You know, like because there's this real like I'm getting weird in my old age, but there's definitely this weird condescension we have towards the young, which I am, just to be clear, 100% guilty of.
I like how you're choosing empathy as you get older. I feel that's a common trait. I'm definitely doing the same.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, I think that sometimes like I see a TikTok take and I'm like, this is infuriating. And if it's like someone who looks like me, i.e., a balding, middle-aged, cisgendered, bearded white man, I'm like, okay, like you need to just maybe pay attention to the things you're watching for the first time. But then when it's someone who's like 19, I'm like, fuck yeah, man, you're figuring it out. And I kind of love it. So context matters is all I'm saying.
How very grown up and nuanced of you.
And that is my side tirade for the day.
I like it.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I've been watching Poker Face with my wife, and it's fantastic. I know you've seen them all.
No, I haven't actually. We're up to episode 3. We've seen 3. I think we've seen 3. So
we're in the same boat.
Yeah, we're purposefully not binging through it.
Mm-hmm. It's not quite the light, airy modern Columbo that I was expecting, but what it is really, really, really good. And I read a really interesting interview with Ryan Johnson saying that when he pitched it to Peacock, he felt like he was insane because he was pitching a show that was basically the opposite of modern shows. You've probably seen this interview as well, where he said, I don't want to make a show that forces people to tune in the following week. I'm making a show that gives them everything they want in one episode. And if they tune in again, it's because they want more of the same. And it's funny how that's how TV always used to be. And it feels kind of revolutionary now not to have that through line of drip feeding to make people come back. And
yeah, although it does have a very small through line, but it's not the point, right? Like it's
episode 3 didn't have them at all, though, did it?
No, I guess it didn't.
The barbecue episode didn't have them at all.
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely like even what little bits of through line are there are not the point as they would be in many other shows.
We're watching the A-Team with my kids, and they're loving the A-Team, and that's a similar kind of thing. It's complete, like, the thing you don't get anymore, which is the family action show.
So you're watching the 80s A-Team right now?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, with the kids, and they love it. And they're naming all the characters when they come up, and they're singing the theme tune, and
it's a memorable theme tune, and honestly, that whole that's part of the Stephen J. Cannell universe of 80s television, is it not? Along with like Magnum PI and all of those. Like he did every show in the 80s, pretty much. It was him and Glenn Larson.
Yeah.
Pretty much like defined 80s television.
Yeah.
So
it's good, and the kids really, really like how there are some clearly fatal car accidents. And then the overdub is like, John, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Or it's people like crawling out after being riddled with gunfire, like rubbing their elbows. They really enjoy that.
I distinctly remember there was concern when I was a kid about that show potentially being too violent for kids, but I mean,
not compared to what they watch now.
Sure. Older conservative people are always making that claim. So
talking of which, I put on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And the last.
Oh, you mean that other good movie in that series?
Hot
take. I know, but
talking of violence in front of kids, my 12-year-old son watched it front to back, and I actually, true story, I passed out after the first scene, which is one of the best opening scenes ever, and I woke up 20 minutes from the end, and we've been holding off on Indiana Jones because we thought we'd have to watch it with them. And the only thing he didn't watch was the guy being sacrificed into lava, spoiler. And he watched the rest of it and absolutely loved it.
Wait, did he watch the scene of the dude having his heart ripped out?
Yep.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Right? That's what these are the questions I asked him. I'm like, wait, so did you watch The Heart? He's like, yeah. And like the guy being rolled through the roller, he's like, yeah, left a blood smear. It was disgusting. I'm like, what about the monkey brain? Did you watch Monkey Brains? Yep. And the Secret Passage? Yep. And turns out he loves Indiana Jones, so we're gonna exploit that for sure.
Did he pick up on the problematic racist overtones? I mean,
no, he's 12.
Well, it's
face value. Come on,
it's a thing to work on. I'm just saying.
It's fine.
It's okay to like things that are problematic. You just have to
It's
understand
fine.
that they are problematic.
It's fine when they weren't trying to be racist at the time, right? And it's good that
No.
you can look. It's good. It's good that no. But I like the Warner Brothers approach, which is look, they weren't trying to be racist, but we know it's super racist.
Yeah.
So watch it with that framework. We're not going to censor it. We're not going to take it away, but it's a discussion, and it's good to like education is better than censorship always. So
yeah, for sure,
it's good to have that discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. Good.
So we could talk about Indiana Jones for the next hour, couldn't we? But what are we talking about this week?
we could talk about Star Trek and Indiana Jones for the rest of time. I'm pretty sure. But this week we are going to talk about two new movies. One Canadian festival darling and one newer. I don't know if it's festival darling, but it's definitely a festival type film that premiered at the Berlinale recently. Both of which are going into as of the time you're listening to this, the first will be in theaters already, and the second will be in theaters this coming Friday. But let's start with the first of those, which is the Canadian coming of age drama comedy I Like Movies, which I saw previously. If you've listened to our I say our, but Simon wasn't on that episode where I think we talked, me and our friend Dakota Arsenault of Contra Zoom Pod did a wrap up of the Vancouver International Film Festival last fall, and it was one that we both talked about, or I think I talked about it, and about how much I liked it then, and now that it's coming out, Simon has had a chance to watch it.
That's right.
Which is good because you should see more movies. However many movies you watch in your life, you should watch more. So I'm always on team see it for yourself.
Yes.
I Like Movies is the story of a young, socially inept, awkward asshole teenager who wants to go to film school and has had some and basically gets a job at a video store and basically spends the movie being an asshole until he learns not to be an asshole. That's the whole movie. It's not that original. It's a coming of age. It's a very Canadian cinephile coming of age story. Which if you were late teens, early 20s in the year 2003, in which this film is set, you may feel, and you were a huge movie dork, you may feel a little bit called out.
Specifically targeted, yes.
Yeah, it may be like, I don't think I was that insufferable, but I might have been.
I don't think you were.
I don't think I was that angry when I was that young, I think is the difference. But yeah, this is basically a story about a young man who's angry and socially, like, basically he makes movies his whole personality because he's struggling for connection in the world, and he does that and suffers for it and learns how to be a better person in the end. I like this movie. I remember quite liking it when I first saw it at BIFF. I liked it still when I watched it recently. It's got a couple of really good performances in it. In particular, I like the kid who's played by Isaiah Leitonen. And I've totally blanked on the character's name now that I have to say it out loud. Lawrence is played by Isaiah Leitonen, who's a Vancouver local, actually. And a couple of good supporting turns as well. It's very low budget. It's mostly shot in one location. and I don't think it's going to be for everyone. But if it's the kind of movie that you might connect with, you will definitely like. It's one of those ones that you're either going to, you know, I think the and the pie chart of like not like and really like and it's fine, that it's fine is going to be the smallest wedge. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
Um, but I liked it, and I can hear you sighing in the background. So I'm
So
curious. I'm
I,
curious to hear how you didn't like it.
I'm on the other side of this coin. I didn't like it. It didn't work for me. And I don't know. I majored in drama and then I taught drama for a long time, and I just found Lawrence as a character completely insufferable and utterly unsympathetic. And I get that his arc is going from insufferable to not being to being sufferable. Maybe I get that, but I was thinking about similar kinds of movies where you focus on someone who's clearly an asshole, and wondering why I think others work better than this. And I think there's got to be an element of sympathy, even if you think he's an asshole. You've got to kind of empathize with the ways he's being an asshole, especially as some things start to come out, um, where you are given justification for some of his actions, some of his behavior. The main problem I had is that I completely understand what it was going for, but I don't think this script or actually the direction was up to the what it where it needed to be. And there was some technical. I know it's zero budget, and that's fine. And there are many zero budget movies that are good. I found there's some technical issues that really tore me out at the moment. There were some performances that didn't really work for me, but primarily I don't. Uh, I I don't think this script and the characterization were strong enough to tell the story that they wanted to tell, and so
Interesting, because
it didn't really work for me. Now,
I kind of disagree, and
yeah,
like so I will agree that I feel like the direction. Um, I feel like the direction doesn't have that sort of distinct auteur type voice. It's very that we might be looking for. Like it's very workmanlike. It's very. I hesitate to say the word basic because I don't. I think that has a very negative connotation that I don't think it deserves. But Chandler Levack, who wrote and directed the film, it is her feature directorial debut. Um, and I don't think it is like amazingly directed from like a technical standpoint, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's just I think that aspect of it is serviceable, perfectly serviceable.
there were a couple of scenes that should not have been takes that were used, where the actors are talking. They begin their lines like overlapping each other, and it's not like a conversational overlap like in Primer. It's like they do a reset. Like it, there were a couple of scenes that should have been another take, and um, I found the whole thing just quite. I don't disagree with you at all in that. Basic is a good word, I think, because there was a lot of opportunities for visual creativity that weren't taken, and there was some scene setups and editing and delivery direction that wasn't good. And the weird thing is, I didn't really like the script. I didn't really like the technical aspects. I didn't find the main guy's performance as compelling as you. And I'm just looking at Wikipedia, and our good friend Rachel is quoted on the Wikipedia for this movie as saying how good his performance is, and of course she is. She absolutely knows what she's talking about. So there's the two sides of the coin, but for me it didn't work. But
I will say that like, and I'm not trying to like call you out by saying this, but I will say that like, in not liking this movie, you are definitely in the minority,
yeah, that's fine. That's
and
fine.
that's not a thing. Like
That's
artists
how.
art is subjective, but it currently sits at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which
Yeah, I mean,
even and to be fair, even I'm surprised by that. Like every movie
yeah,
has.
This is
people who
not.
don't like it, right? Like it's
This is not that movie. Come on, it's not. It's. If you like it, it's not a 100% perfect movie by any stretch. Like it. The weird thing is about this film is that I spent most of it really wanting it to have a more nuance in the script. I wanted there to be sympathy from the main, like some sympathetic elements, instead of just making him the worst kind of film bro asshole. And maybe because I've taught so many people like this, and it's like just triggering me for like flashbacks to that. And I know you worked retail for far longer than me, but I worked in music retail for a couple of years, and there's a lot of truth in how that whole blockbuster setup is how teeth grindingly excruciating it is. But I will say there's one moment in this film that is probably one of my favorite film moments that I've seen in the last year, which is so out of nowhere, and it's um, Romina. I can't. It's an Italian name. Is it Duogo? Romina Duogo. You'd know about this pronunciation more than I would.
I believe that's pretty close to correct. Yes.
Okay, she plays Alana, the manager of this blockbuster. What's it called? It's called Sequels, right? It's a blockbuster, and she appears to be one thing, and then through her interactions with Lawrence, there's a truth comes out about her. Well, she's not in the film industry anymore, and for that is delivered in a single cut with her pacing back and forth, delivering ostensibly what's a monologue. Um,
Hmm.
whilst in
Yeah, it
full
is a
like
great
physical
scene.
control, and the camera is passive. Like I feel like that one scene shows that this filmmaker has got some real potential. Maybe it's an experience thing. I wanted the rest of the movie to have that kind of thought going into it because she was phenomenal in that scene. Like, and monologues are really tricky to get right, especially one like that. And she does so many tiny details that are so true about the rearranging and the fiddling and the slight pacing back and forth. It doesn't look performative at all. I thought she was just blew me away in that scene. Phenomenal. And
Hmm.
then the rest of the film happens. So I kind of it's weird for me to have a movie that didn't work for me really at all. Although I found the last like 10 minutes quite sweet, but also the last scene entirely artificial in its setup and delivery and direction. But for a film that had so many problems with this one little like 5 minute scene in the middle just blew me away, absolutely blew me away. So
By the last scene, you mean the one when he is at university?
yes, yes, when he
Yeah,
meets the people at the table for the first time, and it's not like I don't want to like pick about it too much, but it just wasn't good. The
it's
script and the
it's
direction.
interesting because I really like that scene because it rings it rang kind of true for me in that
Mhm.
like I can't really talk about it without like hardcore spoiling the end. But if we think about this, dear listener, as a film about a kid who's learning not to be an asshole, then
Mhm.
when he finally gets to school and meets a bunch of new people for the first time, he's trying really hard to not be an asshole, and
Mhm.
it's a huge overcorrection.
Yeah.
And that, given the way the rest of the movie goes, especially, and given how many people I know and how I was maybe a bit like that, like that
Mhm.
overcorrection rings really true to me. Is all I'm trying to say.
Mhm. I suppose
And like the forced I wouldn't say like the forced nature of it also rings really true because when you are first coming out of your shell and when you're first and you're trying to be a nice person, you're actively trying to be a good friend and listener. It does feel really super forced, and there's even one character who's like, you can chill out a little bit, dude. Like just like
yeah,
the whole thing the whole thing, like, again, maybe I liked it because part of me feels super called out by this movie, but
maybe.
that part in particular did ring really true to me.
When I say forced, I don't. I tonally, absolutely, it's what it should have been. I just meant the direction and the delivery. It was
No, I'm talking about all of it. Like the direction I found again in that scene fairly passive, but the way that Isaiah Leighton, the way Lawrence approaches that scene where he's clearly trying and has no idea what he's doing in trying to be like a good friend and communicator rings really true to me. Um, yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because like we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying that it worked for me.
Totally.
It's,
I
you
mean,
know,
it's the perfect example of how subjective art is, isn't it? Like, I
yeah,
think that one scene, that one scene in the middle makes me very interested to see what this filmmaker does next, and I'll definitely watch it. But this film didn't work for me. It just wasn't. It didn't feel like ready. Like the script and the direction and the delivery just didn't feel. It didn't have the nuance it needed to tell the story it wanted to tell. But
yeah.
that,
I'm sure at least some of that is budget and time limitations, right? Like I know there's lots and lots of low budget films or mid budget films that get that kind of thing really, really right. And maybe that's an experience thing. But ultimately,
Mhm.
Canadian cinema, which this is, I think, is a very good example of, most of the cinema production in Canada is American. And we don't really talk about this, but the Canadian film industry is actually quite small and not really as valued as maybe it should be because we give all of our resources to American productions.
Mhm.
And I feel like this might be a case of maybe I'm a little more forgiving of that because I feel like they just never have the time or money that they need to get it to 100%. Do you know what I mean? And that's a shame. And
Uh,
maybe
I don't know.
maybe I'm wrong, but I'm always a little more forgiving of stuff that is like
See,
by Canadians for Canadians because of that.
maybe I would be if I hadn't seen some absolutely phenomenal Canadian low budget movies in the last couple of years that have really blown me away. Like, I think when you're a low budget filmmaker, the delivery of the actors is one of the few things you do have left to control because you don't have the money and you don't have the time, but you do have your ability to frame and shoot actors. And I've seen so many good zero budget Canadian movies, and I've seen so many that would be much better if they just had a bit more maybe experience, maybe work. But the fact this person is making movies and hopefully is continuing to make movies, and this has obviously struck a chord with many people, so it's likely she's going to get funding to make something else now. This is all good. This is all positive, and I will definitely watch what she makes because I think there's massive potential there. I just don't think this showed it or
Yeah,
used it for
fair
me
enough.
anyway.
Um, I don't think we can talk too much more without
No.
giving it away. But so how many? I mean, you didn't like it. How many? I think I originally gave it 4 stars. I am.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Um, and probably I will. Uh, I'm sort of struggling on whether I want to keep it at 4 or maybe knock it down to 3 because I did. I mean, I saw it at VIFF, and it was one of the only film I saw at Vancouver International Film Festival in person last year, and I saw it with a group of
Hmm.
friends, and it was a really good night. Um,
Hmm.
um,
That's a big thing as well. We shouldn't downplay the feeling of watching that in
yeah.
a group.
So, I'm content for now to leave it at 4 stars. How many are you going to give it?
It's two for me. It's a two
Yeah,
star for me.
fair enough. Fair enough.
I didn't hate
Um,
it like I hated Knock at the Cabin, so it doesn't seem fair to give it one. And that one scene alone is going to give it an extra star from Romina Duogo.
it's funny
So
actually because I was talking with my wife about our discussion of Knock at the Cabin, and I mentioned, and she was like, she didn't really get why he didn't like it, and then I was like, well, he doesn't really like M. Night Shyamalan movies in general, and she was like, why did you watch that movie then?
so we can tear it apart.
Yeah, it's funny.
If only we had a podcast which she could listen to where I explicitly lay out why I don't like that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
You should do
Anyway,
that thing where you play it and then just watch her reactions. Just
yeah,
like it's really important to you.
yeah.
Okay. Two
Good,
stars from
good.
me.
All right, well, let's move on then. That's I Like Movies, which is currently playing in cinemas in Canada from Mongrel Media. and does have international distribution, but I don't know what that is looking like right now. But it is in theaters, and I at least, again, it doesn't, even if I don't like it, I would say I'm on team see it for yourself. But
Oh,
you should go see
always.
you should go see
Yeah,
it because it's
always.
Canadian and it's in Canadian cinemas. And this is a message to everyone who might be listening who says that like they only ever make superheroes. They don't make movies for adults anymore, man. There's
Yeah,
one in
they do.
cinemas right
Yeah.
now, and you can go see it.
Mhm.
Anyway, and speaking of
Cool.
which, here we're going to talk about another film that happens to be one of those movies. So let's move on to uh, the movie Inside, starring Willem Dafoe, which premiered just recently at the Berlinale Festival in Shocker, Berlin. Um,
Wow.
and this movie, I mean, normally this is where I would ask Simon to give us a breakdown of the movie, but the breakdown of
Yeah,
the
I'll do
movie
that.
is
I
that
can do that.
it is Willem
Come on,
Dafoe in a
take that away
penthouse
from me.
apartment, um,
Inside.
inside an apartment.
This is
That's the whole
this is
movie, folks.
this is plain level title descriptions. He is inside, but it's the interesting thing about this movie is that what you realize after watching it is that it's not quite the movie that the trailer kind of tells you it's going to be.
I mean,
He's not.
I think you figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So it's not about him being inside the apartment. It's we're inside his head.
yeah,
Ooh,
it's
what's
about
inside
his
Will's
descent
head?
into madness,
Yeah,
man.
and
Yeah,
um, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because I love bottle movies. I really love you put your character in a situation from which they are in danger and from which they cannot escape, but from which they must escape if they want to survive, and then watch them escape through their ingenuity. And there's always some twist where something they tried at the beginning turns out to be the thing that gets them out at the end. And I love bottle movies. It's one of my favorite genres. And I was expecting this to be more like that, but it's really not, is it? There's a few there is a through line of him trying to escape, of course.
yeah. I mean, it's not that.
No, no,
Um,
absolutely,
it's
but
just
it's
also not primarily that.
no. I was expecting it to be primarily that, and it is. I, it's weird because I don't want to feel disappointed by this movie, because if someone said to me, "Hey, do you want to watch a movie where Willem Dafoe gets trapped in an art collector's apartment and slowly descends into madness?" I'd be like, "Yes, like I will watch Willem Dafoe slowly descend into madness for 2 hours. That is something he is very, very good at." And so maybe it was expectations versus reality, but it's not your typical bottle movie, but it is a little bit superficial. But it is an examination of he's in a billionaire's apartment full of art and nothing of use whatsoever if he needs to survive. Like there's one particularly clear moment that stated is that there's loads of cans but no tin opener,
Hmm.
and and uh, and his kind of reaction to the art around him. I mean, what's your take on it?
I mean, it's it's tough to discuss how I feel about this film without kind of spoiling what this film actually is, and I feel like that might be best discovered on your own. But yeah, like all of the, I didn't watch the trailer, but I assume that the trailer is basically just all scenes of him trying to escape. And
Yes.
I would imagine that in a 3 minute trailer, it could contain almost all of the scenes of him trying to escape, because the point of this movie is just him inside. Like I texted you last night. I texted you last night when I was watching this movie, or after I watched this movie, that and it was an animated GIF of that scene from Arrested Development where Michael Bluth opens up the fridge and finds a bag that says "Dead dove, do not eat." And he takes the bag out and he opens it, and then he looks up and says, "Well, I don't know what I expected." And that was basically me with this movie, if that makes sense. You know, like the whole setup is Willem Dafoe trapped inside for an hour and 45 minutes, and yeah, that it delivers on that. It delivers on that, and it has a really interesting through line of him trying to escape, but also most of the film is more concerned with what he's doing when he's not trying to escape, and how he's just trying to
Mm. Yeah.
exist in solitude as like this is definitely part of the cinema of COVID. Like it's
Oh yeah,
like
sure.
it's a very unsubtle metaphor for being trapped inside, away from a world you can only see through windows that you can't even break. His only real interaction is with a pigeon that gets trapped on the enclosed balcony of the apartment that he can't get outside to interact with. He can only sort of like coo at it through a window. And ultimately, yeah, he descends into madness. And there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about that I'm not going to, because I feel like the last third of this movie, the themes really come to a head, and the
Yeah,
sort of the artist's intention with this installation uh, really come to the forefront in the third act.
yeah,
Um, because it's really it ends up being really very much, you say he's trapped in an apartment that's full of art, none of which is of any use, and then um, it's also a movie, so it's art itself, and like just go down that rabbit hole and you'll sort of get to where I'm talking about.
yeah. The
You know what I'm?
metaphors are not subtle in this movie at all.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
it's there's no
yeah.
deep read here. There's interesting when in the last third um there's more not psychedelics the wrong word, psychotic elements come in. They, like,
I mean,
he
yeah, he
starts.
begins to hallucinate
Yeah,
and
we see the things that he sees that aren't actually there, and then they're not fully explained. Some of them, particularly towards the end, who these people actually are.
mhm.
Um, so and then the end, of course, the end is a question left for you to answer. And I don't think you could say anything more than that without spoiling it completely. But
Yeah,
um,
if you're one of the people who could never let go whether the top fell over at the end of Inception, then you might have a hard time with this movie. I'm just because the ending is very open. Uh, in
I'd say,
a
yeah,
like
it's a
it's
it's a binary, though, isn't it? There's no sort of grey area at the end. It's either one or the other, and it's up for you to decide what you think it might be. And I don't think either version is wrong. It doesn't tell you that one is clearly the right over the other. I think it's what you want the ending to be. It can be, but it is very much a piece of art and about being trapped within that and being obsessed with it. And we don't really find that too much about him. His character's Nemo, which I'm sure is another very shrouded metaphor, and he was clearly an artist. He's art trained or interested in anyway, and that comes to the forefront of his isolation as well. So uh, it's one of those. I would love to know actually if Willem Dafoe and the director, whose name eludes me for the moment, were friends before this.
Vasilis Katsoupis, I believe is
Thank
his
you,
name.
because this is his only his second film and the first since 2015.
I think it's
And I
actually his feature debut as well. I think his other film
the other's not a feature.
might be a short.
Right. And it feels like, hey, Willem, I've got the script where it's basically you in this apartment. We can shoot it in like 5 days. And it's you. It's a piece of theatre, basically. It reminded me a lot of Metamorphosis as well, particularly as um, his very gangly, ribby body is used very much as a performance element. Like
Hmm.
he contorts and bends and twists, and his ribs stick almost painfully out of his chest. And Willem Dafoe has such a specific face anyway, which has always been used really, really well, and it's used well here as well. And it did feel like a piece of theatre at many, many points, but um, it would have been hard to pull this off in the way, because there's so many visions that we see as well. It's one of those lovely bits of theatre that could only be done on film as effectively. So I did
Yeah,
enjoy it.
I don't think you could not. I don't think you could not do it as a theater piece, but I don't.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be as immersive, especially in the last act. I don't think.
yeah, sure.
Um, but yeah, it's an interesting movie. Would be the way to frame it. It's interesting too because it is really just the Willem Dafoe show. Like
Yes.
there are two other people in it who never speak, um, and who don't really appear. It's difficult to say how they appear, but they don't really appear in reality. They only really appear in his hallucinations. Um,
There's really not much dialogue in this movie at all. One of the other characters speaks in one hallucination, and Willem Dafoe like mumbles and chants to himself now and again, but it's mainly a piece of physical theatre.
yeah, yeah, it's super interesting. It reminded me a lot, not in terms of its like themes or tone, but the only other film I've seen that's even close to this is that movie from the mid-teens, directed by J.C. Chandler, called All Is Lost, which is just um, five. I could see Robert Redford on a sinking sailboat, um, and that movie doesn't quite have the thematic through line that this one does, or at least not that I remember. But it very much is like another one where it's like very much a piece of physical theater of a man going through a thing, surviving through an ordeal.
Mm.
Um, and if you like that one, you'll probably like this one.
Yeah,
So it's
I
you
think
know,
if you go in with expectations of it being Willem Dafoe's slow descent into artistic madness, and if that's what you want to watch, I think you're going to be satisfied. But I think if you go in like I did, based on the feeling that he's going to try and actively get out, and the movie's going to be about him being ingenious and using stuff around the house to get out, then I think it's going to come up a little bit short for you. There is going to be people that watch this and think it's an overly pretentious like waste of time,
mm-hmm.
and so your mileage is really going to vary on this, on uh, what your mileage is on artistic pretension and slow burning like psychological movie like this.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not that. It's
Yeah,
like
right.
it
It's
is a
enough of
movie
it.
that like in our current climate of film, plot is king, and this movie doesn't so much have that.
Hmm.
So your mileage is definitely
Hmm.
going to vary based on how 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 far into the plot is the only thing that matters mindset you are,
I wonder
basically.
actually if this probably plays better in a cinema, in a big dark room where you're isolated with him. Um,
I mean, every
so
film probably works better in a cinema. Would be my
like I remember, yeah, it's not thematically similar, but I watched Under the Skin, that Scarlett Johansson movie, by myself in an empty theater, and I think the effect that had on me, the situational effect that had on me whilst watching that, and you can't escape it. It's huge in front of you, and you can't escape what you're seeing. I get the feeling this is going to be an empty theater thing. I don't think many people are going to go and see this, and I think it might be enhanced by being semi alone in a giant dark room with it, maybe because it's so visual as well. So it might actually enhance it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think also it's definitely like the point of the film might be better made in a
Mhm.
situation like we
Mhm.
having home screeners for it um, might actually be maybe detrimental. Not detrimental, but like I
No.
think the ability to look away at all might actually be detrimental to the experience of the film.
And also, when your name isn't splashed across the bottom in a watermark, that might help as well.
Well, that's a
It's
whole other
another discussion.
conversation. Yeah, I
So
would say that I
we're
would say that honestly that like that didn't bother me because I've had so many that are so much worse.
oh
But
my
anyway,
god, are we naming names here?
nope, we're not. We're just
Okay,
not going to go down that road today.
I know exactly who you're talking about. So, how many stars are you landing with this then?
Three. I give it three.
Me
I
too.
generally speaking, I liked it,
Hmm.
and I think it's really interesting and experimental. And I am tempted to give it more, but I would say that it is a little too. What's the right word here? It's a yeah, three. We'll just stick with saying that it's a three-star movie.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I think um, there's a lot here to like, and there's a lot here to see. And Willem Dafoe is the perfect kind of performer for this, but it wasn't subtle in really anything it was trying to say. And
yeah, unsubtle. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. It's a little
yeah,
too unsubtle
yeah,
to be
it's an interesting
any more than
experiment.
3.
Yeah, I feel the same. 3 stars for me too.
Yeah, good.
Pretty good.
All right.
Well, shall we wrap up there?
We should. So thank you so much for listening. Again, if you one thing we didn't actually announce on the show last week is we are now paying attention to our patrons, our Patreon subscribers. So each week we are going to be uploading basically all of the banter we go through before we start recording as bonus ramblings. The last week we talked at length about The Last Starfighter. This week we talked about Stuart McLean, The Vinyl Cafe, which is a very Canadian thing. But if you are a patron at any tier, you can hear that by checking it out, and that'll be out on the feed, on the patron feed. And tonight, if you're listening to this on Sunday, March the 12th, which is the day it comes out, we will be doing our annual Oscars live blog this evening. Look for that at awesomefriday.ca as well. Yeah, that's it. Thank you to everyone who is listening. Whether you're new or old, we appreciate that you're here. If you like what you've heard, and if you want to hear the bonus material, please consider giving us a, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, give us a 5-star review, or support us via Patreon, again, for the bonus material. You can find us on the socials. I am at SmatthewAF, and Simon is at Temporary Pen on the Twitters. And the show is at Awesome Friday CA, basically every social media where it exists.
While it exists.
Yeah, true. We record this here in Vancouver on the ancestral lands of the Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. One more time, thank you so much for listening and for joining us on this Awesome Friday.
Bye.